Well, tonight or this afternoon, wherever it is and whatever time it is for you, we're going to speak on a most incredible subject, the intimacy of love. Because love, in essence, is a face-to-face meeting between two individuals. And it is love in its absolute and wonderful sense when we look at each other in terms of everything we see, not just the potential, but everything that we realize that person can be. Let me start with what Frankl actually said about love. Let's just listen to this. He said, love is the only way to grasp another human being in the innermost core of his or her personality. No one can become fully aware of the very essence of another human being unless he loves them. By his love, he's enabled to see the essential truths and features in the beloved person. And even more, he sees that which is potential in him. When Frankl said what man is, he is not yet, but ought to be and should become, we see that should become towards what ought to be in that person's life. And this is, I want to say, every time I am invited to speak about any subject, it's a challenge to my thinking, and I realize a new truth every time. That is why communion and conversation between us are so important, because it evokes our understanding of what we deeply share in common. And the truths of logotherapy, which are truths that are actually the truths of meaningful living, emerges more strongly in this interaction with one another. And I want to share my experience through my life. And I want to do of this fundamental outreach towards what Frankl says is the unconditional meaningfulness of my life and of your life, and which in no way we can do logotherapy if we are not keenly aware of the potential in another person. If we can't see all that they can be, and it's like our eyes need to lose their screens. Like Frankl said, love is not blind. Love opens our eyes. And what is more, it opens us to such a wonderful experience of life, a new look at life. Life becomes beautiful through the eyes of love. And you know, deeper than that is, like I said, it's not just that you look at the uniqueness of the individual in front of you, but you actually see, you can sense their destiny. Like Frankl said about the meaning of love in Doctor and the Soul. He said, we have seen how the meaningfulness of human existence is based upon the uniqueness and singularity of the human person. All of life's meaningfulness can only be experienced through love. And therefore, you know, I've been asked by Nino to tell the story, the love story of my life, after she saw a posting by Pan of the 51st anniversary of the marriage of my husband and myself. and her inquisitiveness as to know what is the story behind such fidelity, such faithfulness, such togetherness for a lifetime. Because, you know, isn't it so? And I'm sharing my story with you because if I want it to resonate with you, it has to resonate with yours. And you will recognize features in your own life that I will be sharing about my own. And this is it, you know, the commonality that we share with each other. And when Frankl said that unless mankind is not to destroy itself with division and heartlessness, lovelessness, violence, conflict, then it'll have to find a common will to common meaning. And what is our commonalities? Let's share it. Because I want to say to you categorically, if you discover it, you discover the essence of love. Because that's where it is. You know, Frankl spoke about that the 10 Commandments doesn't seem to have such sway anymore, but we have to listen to the 10,000 commandments that come to us every day. But I want to say this, and he would be in full agreement with me, that the first tablet of the law given to us is appreciate the life that you have been given, as unique, as singular, as precious. Preserve the purity of your soul, like Frankl said, the unscathed human spirit, the potential to become what you ought to be, and that the law encourages us to strive after. And every single challenge in life, every opportunity, every experience is actually coming from the transcendent and from the divine, filtering through to our consciousness, whether we recognize that as the voice of the transcendent or not. But it is of a truth that God is love, and that he loves unconditionally, and that we are created in his image to do what? To say yes to life, in appreciating it, in preserving it, into following its cues, into giving our all in commitment to what? To a service, a service to one another. Because we also have to say in the second tablet, a no, an absolute no to what divides us, to what hurts, to what slanders, to what envies, to what rapes, what kills and what murders. We have to say no to that which destroys life. And you know, this choice, as Frankl said, that we have the freedom of choice, is put before us every single day in our own concrete, down-to-earth, here and now lives, wherever we are, whoever we are, and in whichever circumstances life comes to us, and it invites us to give the right response. Like Frankl said, there's only one answer to every question that life puts to us as a challenge, as an invitation, as an experience to have, and that is the right, the singular one, the most responsible one. And you know, the stop signs we're given in life when we go off course, isn't it uncanny? Isn't it true of you that you cannot deny that you have conscience? You have an inherent consciousness of what should and what shouldn't be. You know very well when you do what shouldn't be. I cannot excuse myself or justify actions I did in the past. I very well knew in the doing it that I shouldn't have done it. And this is part of setting us on course to learn to say no to what is wrong and to say yes to life. But what an invitation love is. Because I don't know if it's true of you, but I think deep down, like Frankl said, we know intuitively, even though we do not consciously always recognize it, that we are related to someone other than ourselves. We have to find that connection. We search for that connection because it brings our life on course. Now, to come to the love story of my life. If I look back, and it's so wonderful to reflect on your life and to see where you came from and how life led you all along the way, even through the ditches and, the detours. It was always ready to invite you back. And it was always ready to put you on course. That there is this deep, deep longing in us, a search for a vital connection, for actually the experience of unconditional love. That I can have someone that can look at me. And this is the new insight that I had in contemplating the theme of today. It's not just that you see my uniqueness, but that you also see my faults, my failings, my vulnerabilities, my weaknesses, my fears. You see it all. And you love me nonetheless. Love is, if it's love, it's unconditional. It doesn't ask you to live up to a standard before you are loved. That's conditional love. And I've had to fight conditional love all my life long. And it was always a searching after, I've learned much more through things that are wrong than things that are right. When I read a certain theory, a certain philosophy, and contemplate a certain religious persuasion, I think it through. What does it say in the end? Can I accept it and bring it to my innermost being as a truth? Or does it fall short of it? Does it even deviate from it? Is it hypocritical? Is it some kind of super ego guilt, which we have to? This is the kind of shame we have to fight. The kind of shame that is brought on others because they are humiliated, judged, they are seen through prejudicial eyes. We have to do the exact opposite. And that journey may be hard and long. We may have to face very many trials and perplexities, hurts and sufferings in our lives. But for the joy that is set before us, you can endure any and everything. That is why your pursuit of love, not of happiness, not of success, but of love, will bring you to a triumphant ending. And you sense it. You sense it. There is much more to enjoy and to be grateful for and to treasure than there is the opposite. Oh, in fact, good, love have got extreme power over evil and wrongdoing. I want to read a little song sung by Ella Fitzgerald, which in my teenage years, I was searching for the kind of love that would satisfy me in a very deeply personal sense. And that's the song, Someone someone to watch over me. There's a saying old, says that love is blind. Still, we've often told, seek and ye shall find. So I'm going to seek a certain lad I've had in mind. Looking everywhere, haven't found him yet. He's the big affair I cannot forget. Only man I can ever think of with regret if I should not meet him. He said, I'd like to add his initial to my monogram. Tell me, where is the shepherd for this lost lamb? There's a somebody I'm longing to see. I hope that he turns out to be someone to watch over me. You know, there's such a lovely saying in the Song of Solomon where it says, don't awaken love before it's time. Don't. And in our search for love, we can so often make the mistake to settle for and try and make love happen. And I went through a failed marriage, a sweetheart romance that I had, the pressure of this precious man for us to marry when I felt, you know, it's not quite right. And when Frankel said, it's not always a question to choose between black and white. There may be good options, but is it the right option? You know, when after 2 years, I was so restless in that marriage and I asked for a divorce. I know I've hurt him, but I said, you must understand, I have not found the man that is to be an ordained part of my life. What does it mean to get to meet your Bashir, your destined partner? It means that you can have the coupling that will lead you onto your destiny, your peculiar and unique calling in life. And you know, however heartbroken he was, he understood that. And he gave me the divorce I asked for. Because I said to him, you deserve somebody that really is meant for you. It's not good enough that you've got someone who loves you, yes, but you're not the man in her life. That's not good enough. And I am so grateful he became a great Afrikaans writer. And that was his destiny. It wasn't mine. It wasn't mine. So, you know, after the divorce, I threw myself into my studies, into the completion of my clinical training as a clinical psychologist at Teria Hospital in Johannesburg. And, you know, once you put your life on course, things start to happen. You meet one guidepost, 1 mile, and have one milestone after another in your life. It's incredible. And which was the first one? In Teria Hospital, the psychiatrist there still had a very medically based view of mental disorders. And they actually resented the clinical psychologists that were training in the hospital as well. You do therapy by talking? You know, what nonsense. This person is a schizophrenic. It's beyond reaching this person. And you know, and in that kind of a spite, I was sent a girl called Anne, who was diagnosed as a catatonic schizophrenic. Okay, she didn't talk at all. So what a challenge to me, the psychiatrist, that, you know, okay, you do therapy with a person that doesn't talk and doesn't respond at all. But I sat with Anne. I've told this story before, but this was the first milestone. I saw her beyond the physical and psychological layers of abnormality. I saw beyond her, and behind that, I was looking for the person of Anne because, like Viktor Frankl, whom I still did not know much about, it's to, he says, if he does not believe that there is a person behind the mental affliction, he would not be a psychiatrist. And his whole mission was to humanize psychiatry. And the wonderful effect that I just sat with her in silence, but in an atmosphere of such unconditional, actually longing acceptance, wanting to meet Anne behind her schizophrenia. And you know, she started emerging. That was the incredible thing. She started emerging. She started looking up furtively into my eyes. And she wanted to come to me. I could see there was a need to be with me. And that when she left, she felt better. In fact, so well did Anne become that, as the custom was in the hospital, the patients are sent home on occasions. And she was sent home to her very dysfunctional family. And especially the mother that actually kept her sick in order to feel in a kind of dominant way, healthy. The mother was the really chronically ill person. But you know, like Frankl said, even in mental illness, there is a choice. You can be a paranoid schizophrenic that forgive your delusional persecutors, or you can actually try and go and kill them. Even there is a choice between good and what you should do and what you shouldn't do. And the mother's choice was certainly in the direction of what she shouldn't do. And that particular day, when the mother was preparing a tea for her guests, and she always had Anne sit in the corner, Anne got up, took the tablecloth and ripped it off the table with the china splattering all over the place, saying, "No!" You know, it reminded me of and please, you must see this. You must see that actually our mission is to clearly say yes to what should be and no to what should not be. And it is a journey of overcoming what is wrong with what is good. It is to turn every tragedy into a spiritual triumph. That is really what our lives are about. Anyway, Anne was really saying no. And as I said, it reminded me of one of my students who had therapy with a very abused girl who was actually given out by her mother for child prostitution. And he worked in the courts. He was a forensic psychologist. And he had to prepare her for the trial of the mother that was brought to book by the law when they found out about this abuse. And he took her and he said, "You know, we are going to go in a helicopter way above, you know, eliciting her self-transcendent spirit to lift her above the horror that her life had been up to that point." But in the meantime, she had also been put in a foster home, which with a loving foster parent, which really did a lot towards her healing. So eventually, you know, slowly, she would focus on where that all happened. And actually, I must move on quickly, because what really happened as a theme in my life was a desire to go into the depths of where the original hurt is and to meet my client there. Not just, you know, in the ordinary noogenic kind of counseling that most logotherapists do in helping people to go on despite. I wanted to go down to the depths so that their sufferings, that we can get a healing, because they have found they could look at what happened to them and deal with it in depth. And that was my desire, to go and study psychoanalysis, which I did. But coming back to this little girl, when she was brought to trial, she had the courage, when her mother was standing in the dock, to say to her, "You are not my mother. You should have protected me, and you did not." Wow, what courage. Anyway, as I said, I went on. I won a bursary to go and study at the Tavistock, the famous clinic for psychoanalysis. And here's the second milestone. Great milestone of my life. Even before the courses began, I was alone in a little hotel room that smelt of gas. And oh boy, I really was overcome with great feelings of loneliness, you know, away from home and family, in the strange environment, and before I could actually get started. But one of the men that have dated me back then had given me, not seriously, but anyway, we did go out. He gave me two addresses, or two telephone numbers of two bachelors, okay? And I was getting so depressed. I said, wait. I've got to do something. I'm going to phone these bachelors. And I did. I made an appointment with the one for the Saturday evening and with the other for the Sunday afternoon lunch. Oh, my word, the first one, Saturday evening. He was so prim and proper, an Englishman. I felt so uncomfortable, self-conscious. I hated every minute of it, and I tried to cancel the second one, but thank God I couldn't, because I only had the telephone number of the second bachelor at home, and at his work rather, and not at his home. And I will never forget, as they called me down and said, "David Shantall is waiting for you downstairs." And as I walked down the stairs, this blonde-haired man with a yellow jacket that made him look even more blonde was leaning over and animatedly speaking to the receptionist. That was David. He loved people. He was forever interacting with them, and he always brought out the best in them. But that I was yet to discover, because over lunch, I suddenly realized I'm at home with him for the first time, truly for the first time in any relationship with anybody, actually male or female. Did I feel totally myself. The way he looked at me, the way he spoke to me. In fact, he had made an arrangement for tennis straight after lunch in case this blind date was somebody he also didn't much like. But you know, he tried his best to cancel that tennis meeting, which he couldn't do. And when I was back in my little hotel room, I jumped around saying, "Oh God, he's so friendly. He's so friendly." You know, in that wonderful film, As It Is in Heaven, the main character, Daniel, asked Lena that he had fallen in love with. He said, "How do you know when you love somebody?" And she answers, "It's when you're pleased to see them. It's when you like being with them. It's that they make you happy." Oh my word, love. Love is true happiness. That's the outflow. That kind of meaning gives you true happiness. That meeting, that unique connection with somebody that you come to love. But you know, he was very slow on the uptake, even though I looked forward for, to because this commitment really grew. And one day when he walked away from me, I thought, I love this man. So, you know, the next time he came around, I grabbed him and kissed him. He was quite really taken aback. But I said, when are you going to ask me to marry you? So he arranged a special dinner at some grand place, you know, where he was not going to pop the question. And this is what really set me on my personal journey. But you know, it's not just a personal journey, because I must tell you, even if you do not have such a man in your life, even if you are unmarried, even if you are alone, you know, it's to find that connection with people. You know, there's such a lovely saying in Isaiah 54 where it says, more are the children of the unmarried wife than the children of the married. Because the urge is actually to connect to people, and as you do, and as you serve them, as you love them, it comes back to you with such great reward. Your life has meaning. It is needed. It is looked up to. It is embraced. You get the respect. You get everything that you can ever ask for in loving others. How richly it comes back to you. But anyway, you know, at that very time, I realized that however much, and I learned a tremendous deal from the great master, Freud, with his granddaughter and the psychoanalyst, his daughter and the psychoanalysts that were there. A great, great, great deal that I'm very grateful for, because it goes into the depths of infant experiences and childhood experiences and the hurts and the fantasies that arise and all of that. And the search, right, for connection, but it didn't go far enough, because part of it was a personal analysis and going back and back and back. I thought, wait. Life comes to us from the future in everyday opportunities. And so focused on my past, I'm missing out on what I should be enjoying now. It was then that I remembered how our philosophy professor, who was a great follower of Viktor Frankl, used to always challenge me because of my psychoanalytic training, you know, challenged me as to how far that really went. And so it is that I established where I could find Viktor Frankl. He was teaching in German in Vienna. But I nonetheless wrote to him asking him if I could come and study with him. And that was the third great milestone in my life, because why? After I sent the letter, I thought, Teria, you're crazy. You can't speak German. And that's exactly what he wrote back to me. You cannot come and study with me because you're not proficient in German. But here we are. You reach out to life and life will come and meet you. He said, I invite you to my first logotherapy training center in America, where I will be teaching in English. Oh, wow. And of course I went. Of course I went. And there, actually, the greatest turning point in my life happened. Because, you know, I had just listened to him that morning. And, you know, it was like I was in a desert of wandering and searching, and it was living waters. It was bubbling up from inside me in excitement at what he was saying. Because, you know, He was saying, live each day, every moment of that day, in a highly aware and responsible way. He said, it's like you have a diary and you are like a book of life that you are recording who you met, what that encounter was like, what you heard in terms of truth that added to your understanding, what problem you had, and even if you didn't address it quite in the way you would have wanted to, that you make a note of to go and put right the next day. But if you have done it, oh, wow, to write it down. And every experience of beauty, everything that makes you open up to life as something incredibly precious, because that page you carefully can file away in your past, because he said, having been in the right way is the surest way of being. This is how you become yourself. Do your duty, respond to life, and you become who you are meant to be. You lose your unnatural self-consciousness and become highly self-aware, vigilant. Well, having heard this, I got a phone call from my family to say that my father had passed away. Now, I was very fond of my father, and I had a very close relationship with him. And I was thrown into a state of deep grief. What did I grieve? Listen, what did I grieve? My grief was every moment I did not treat him right. The things that I said that was hurtful to him. My father was a very irresponsible man. He made debts very easily and threw the names of the debtors in a lat and pulled out these that he was going to pay. He bought me a grand piano once. I only had it for 2 months and they came to collect it because he couldn't go on with the payments. But he was a wonderful man nonetheless. And, I was so upset with him because it also meant that he moved from job to job. And, I was from one school to another. I had a very unstable, confusing childhood, but I did have love. And, in the early morning, I dreamt, I fell asleep and I dreamt that I wrote a letter to my father, expressing my love for him and asking his forgiveness for the things that I did to hurt him. And then I woke up with a painful start. He's not going to receive that letter. He's not here anymore. And now here comes the incredible thing. We talk about coincidence. Aria, you here, you are a great explorer of what you call synchronicity. Those synchronized moments, they're not just mere coincidences. Because you know what? Before I left to study in London, my father gave me a diary. And he said, record what you experience, and when you come back, you can share it with me. Do you know that I had written nothing but nothing in that diary? I told this story before, so for those who've heard it. The pages were blank and empty. And then, Frankel in the camp, when he was almost at the end of himself with the suffering and the horror that he was going through, and he cried out, is there any meaning in my life in the face of all of this? And he heard a resounding yes. And so, it was my cry when I realized, when I wrote that letter in my dreams to my father, that I heard a voice very distinctly. It was the voice of my father. And you know, he was slightly angry and impatient when he said, "Fill up your diary." And that was the turning point in my life. I had already been set on a personal course in finding the love of my life. But you know, we're given people to love, close ones, our family, our children, the deep and personal, intimate connections that we make with a few of those that are given to us in this way that we belong to. But that's only the start. That's only the start, because there's a beyond after that. We actually set each other on the way of our own unique personal destinies, and no destiny is the same. Each one's life is irreplaceably unique. And if you live it in the way it should be lived, it becomes irreplaceable. You begin to be a part of a bigger story. As you reach out to people beyond your own. And that is what I sensed. You know, I got up from my bed and I said, I have to know where I'm going and go there. And that became a very determined way of living since that day. Frankel congratulated me the next morning because my family had advised me to stay, and I decided I would stay. My father went into debt to send me to America. Didn't have a bursary to go there. And Frankel congratulated me for staying. It was wonderful. And, you know, but then coming back to London, David was there at the airport to meet me. And I said to him, "You look so familiar. You look so familiar." He said, "But of course I'm familiar. You know me." I said, "No, you look so familiar." Oh, God. To recognize, you know, that your life is destined to be with somebody. You know, one of my books, when I did the dedication in front and I mentioned my husband, I said, "How do you thank somebody who brought you on your destined path?" Because David was Jewish. And, you know, and Frankel was talking about the meaning of suffering that he had gone through in the camps. And where he got his own vocation when he saw himself standing on a well-lit platform in an auditorium where people were sitting in upholstered chairs listening to him, and then he was giving an exposition of life in its utmost horror and suffering, and that it's possible, not only possible to find meaning there, but that kind of contrary experience evokes in your breast such a defiant power of the human spirit to say, "No, I will not be defined as vermin, as nothing, as on the list of the unwanted. I will live who I am." And listen, you know, this brings me to the other turning point in my life, because without that, I would not be where I am today. And that was when my husband and I, when, you know, eventually, let me first tell you this, that he was also so slow in the uptake to actually get down to marrying me, that I had to go back because of my bursary, and he was going to wind up his affairs in London and join me because, you know, he is an ex-South African. And he thought he'll give it another try because he couldn't stand apartheid. That's why he left. And he couldn't stand the hypocrisy of a Christian church that didn't allow blacks to worship there. He questioned what was my Christian upbringing. Anyway, point is, I had no sooner get back to South Africa. I couldn't stand this. No, I couldn't. I remember sitting in the plane, and the hostess asked me, "Where were you?" I said, "No, I just got. I came to get married." She said, "Oh yes, and where's your husband?" "No, I left him behind. I'm going home." Sooner home when I sent him a telegram, "Marry me when I will be in London for the Pesach holidays, Easter holidays." I wasn't going to wait. And so, I just want to share this with you because it was the most incredible experience, really. Frankel said meaning is like, that drawing power of the future. That is like iron filings in a magnetic field. Everything about your life just harmoniously come together towards that end point of connection, the final connection. And this is really what our marriage was like, because you know what? Of course, I wasn't Jewish. And there was no way that we could get married in a synagogue. So what did David do? I thought we'll just get married with a marriage registrar, but he knew it was a holy moment for me. So I was raised in the Dutch Reformed Church in South Africa, and he tried to find the Dutch Reformed Church in London, and he did come across there was a Dutch Reformed Church led by a Dutch pastor that he went to see and said, "Will you marry us?" And the pastor said, on one condition, he said, "Oy vey." He would ask me to convert to Christianity, and that's the end. I'm a Jew. But what did this pastor say? "I just want to get to know you." My God. It turned out that this Dutch pastor, that his family, his mother and father, hid Jewish children in their home during the Holocaust. What a man to marry us. And here in this little Austin Friar Dutch Reformed Church filled with Jews, because you know what the strange thing is, that I always felt attracted. I had a strange fascination. Well, I think if you read the Bible, you cannot else but kind of wonder, who are the Jewish people that God had chosen and called his own to be a light to the rest of the world? My word. Wow. There's something very special about being Jewish. Great, but it's actually a demonstration of a story we all should have. We're called to have a mission of responsibility to the rest of the world. We're not chosen because we're special. I remember at the wedding of my daughter and when my two brothers attended, and they were, and that by that time I was Jewish, and she married under a chuppah, that my one brother was weeping. And the other one came and said to David, "Now I know why God chose you." David said, "Why?" He said, "Because you're so wonderful." He said, "Wait a moment. No, God did not choose us because we're wonderful. He chose us to be wonderful." Wow. Anyway, coming back to this little church, you know what? When David and I decided to get married, he said, "What about our children?" And I said to him, "If love doesn't overcome all boundaries, we must stop right now." I was still, I was so ignorant at the time, but that's what I said. But what did the Germany preach on 1 Corinthians 13 in the New Testament? Love suffers long and is kind. Love does not envy. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up, does not behave rudely, does not seek its own, is not provoked, but then thinks no evil. But it does not rejoice in iniquity, but it rejoices in the truth. It bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never fails. That's what he was preaching. And it ends, and he said, now we see in a mirror dimly. We don't quite understand, do we? Did I understand? No. But one day, face to face. Now we know in part, but then we shall know also as we are known. We are unconditionally loved, and unconditional worth has been invested in each one of us to find our lives a precious gift. Just like the death of my father made me realize, listen, Teria, you better get going. And like Frankel said, use the passing time and use it well. But like I said, the other experience I needed to have was when David came back to South Africa. And by the way, when he came back, I just played this very famous love story song to him. And just the lyrics of it is so beautiful. I said, where do I begin to tell the story of how great a love can be? The sweet love story that is older than the sea. The simple truth about the love you gave to me. Where do I start? You know, but we got going and we joined the Sharit HaPleita, the Holocaust survivors meeting in Johannesburg, because one thing that deeply touched me and actually steadied me on my Jewish road was that I was fascinated by Frankel and other survivors that could survive with such triumph, that he says you could raise to the level of a saint or descend to the level of a swine. The choice is yours. But he said the best of us did not survive. Those were the ones that gave their last pieces of bread to the others starving that needed it more than they did, and that went into the gas chambers upright with a prayer on their lips. The best did not survive. But that was survivor responsibility when Frankel sank on his knees after liberation and he said, I cried to the Lord from my narrow prison and he answered me in the freedom of space. And that was it. When he said, if you have suffered that much, it must mean that your life there is something waiting for you. Not survivor guilt, but survivor responsibility. I was fascinated. Okay, that's why we joined this organization. And the first night there was this little redhead Jewess. And she came up to me. She said, we were getting afterwards talking with some of them. And they were very obviously interested in me because I certainly didn't look Jewish. But she said, you know, Hitler could turn us into a heap of dead bodies. Yes, he could do that, but he could not get at us. I was fascinated. And that was the beginning of my doctorate. I said, I'll never do a doctorate just to get a piece of paper on the wall. I will only do it if it's given to me as a life task. And there it was. Because she was the one, when I recorded her story, also said that in the camps, that, you know, it was the kind of paradoxical intention in the greatest courageous way when she said in her mind, she actually said, first of all, that, you know, because of the horror of the indecency, like the Frankel said, there are only two races in the world, the race of the decent and the race of the indecent, and we are to join the race of the decent to overcome the race of the indecent. We have to triumph over what is wrong. And to see that they rose to such heights because, you know, she said, I never, ever thought so clearly, so high, emotionally and intellectually than then in pain and degradation and in hunger. And she said, so great, did she transcend the situation in her mind when she heard Beethoven's music and heard the poetry and the prose of writers that she loved, that she said in her mind to these Gestapo Nazis, come and get me. Come. You've got the gun, but you are the nothing. You cannot touch who I am. She said the whole effort in the camps was to break the Jewish spirit, to make them grovel and beg for their life. And she said that with that defiant no that arose in their breasts. And she illustrated it when she in the Kovno ghetto, because she didn't look Jewish. They chose her for underground work, and she was caught and brought to the Gestapo headquarters, where this man, after 3 days of locking her up and where she refused to eat anything and was in communion with her parents, that he called her. And she said she stood as upright as she could before him. And he said to him, don't you know I've got the power over life and death? Why don't you bend down, kiss my boots, and beg for your life? And she said, as in a calm and a most clear and resolute voice as she was able to muster, yes, whether I live or die is your decision, but that I don't bend down and kiss your boots is mine. And so rattled was this man, filled with such hubris and pride, and the will to power always seeks out the weak and the vulnerable, and it hates the righteous. So rattled was he by the defiance of this little woman. I think she was barely 14 years old, so a ridiculous young age, that he sent her back to the Kovno ghetto. So that was a great turning point in my life, and then my children. As I said, how foolish. And you know what? When we realize our foolishness with our kids, we can ask their forgiveness, as I did to my daughter many years later when she listened to me talking in one of these presentations. And in that audience, I said, darling, forgive me. Had I known what I should have been to you, what I should have given you, but I didn't know. And I wish I knew then what I know now. And what I didn't know then afterwards was it was very, very risky of me to put my children, leaving the situation of my being not a Jewess with my Jewish husband, I put the children in Jewish day schools, Jewish nursery school and Jewish day schools, because I wanted them to treasure their father's heritage. I thought of myself as a righteous Gentile, and quite frankly, I thought that, who am I to become Jewish, come in, slip in through the back door. I'd rather just serve and love, which I did, at great cost, through when I was still in the church, that I had the boldness to stand up against anti-Semitic doctrines. In fact, I brought a lot of censure on, I was censored, and I wasn't allowed to teach like I did in my home. about the Jewishness of the scriptures and our obligation to love and to revere and to protect the Jew who is chosen to be a light to us, that we do have to take hold of the slip of a Jew, like it says in Zechariah, and say, we have heard that God is with you and we're going with you. But you know what? When it came time to Millie's bat mitzvah, she was not allowed to have one because she wasn't Jewish, and it very, very deeply pained her. And she suffered as a result of that, feeling she wasn't good enough, that she was an outsider, when love is so all-inclusive. But so great was her distress that I had started attending the synagogue along with my husband, and I went to the rabbi. I said, look, you must understand, I'm not Jewish, but this is who I am. And he said, you're very welcome, and know that if I preach against intermarriage, I'm not talking about you. But when I shared Millie's distress with him, he said, listen, I'll make an appointment at the Beth Din, that is the Jewish authorities, religious authorities, and maybe they'll give you permission that Millie can become Jewish if you just, follow the main commandments of keeping the Sabbath and eating kosher. But so I went, and who did I meet? A rabbi, his name is Rabbi Ganendi, I came with all the things about Millie, and he shoved it aside. He was questioning me. He didn't give a single question to David, my husband, that was sitting there, or didn't ask me about Millie or Samuel, my son, that was also already born and was at a pre-bar mitzvah stage. And he said to me, Mrs. Shantall, what's preventing you from becoming Jewish? I said, what? What? But the penny dropped. It was a ruse. My husband always wanted to come back to Israel. He wanted to settle there, and because he had a great turnaround in his life as well. And he always called me his Ruth, but then I really read what Ruth said, and I said that to him. When Naomi said to Ruth, like she did to Orpah, turn back to your own family, your own kid. She said, don't urge me to leave you. Don't make me turn back from following you. Wherever you go, I will go. And wherever you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Wherever you die, there I will be buried. May the Lord strike me down if anything but death separates you from me. And Millie was actually instrumental in my conversion, which she could participate in. Samuel, we had Samuel circumcised, but by our doctor and it wasn't a religious circumcision, so he just had a bit of blood to be drawn from him, and my children were then safely within the Jewish fold. And the great joy of my life is not only that Millie found, after searching through many relationships, her Bashir, my beloved son-in-law, who is Jewish. And when she came to me and said, Mommy, I've been so unhappy, but you know what? Sean makes me happy. And I said, darling, you marry Sean. And they've got a wonderful life, and she is a brilliant lawyer. still in South Africa. But Samuel preceded us. I sent Millie to Bar-Ilan for a year. Samuel came to Kibbutzim, and he fell in love with Israel. He came to Israel before we did. And he calls himself the running tour guide. They are so different, these two children. And when I once at a parent-teachers meeting, Millie was she's an obsessive compulsive. So is my husband. But, like Frankel said, it's how you use the traits with which you were born, even how you use your schizophrenia if it's constitutionally based. How much our mental patients have got to tell us about the terrors of disconnection and of abandonment when they can't get through because of dysfunction. And, and Millie had turned her obsessiveness, her perfectionism in being so studious. She was always at the top of her class, and I once had foolishly asked her, darling, did you, Ilan was the other boy in her class that sometimes outdid her, and then she was second and he was first. I said, who came first, you or Ilan? And she looked at me in shock. She said, Ma, I don't compete with anybody. I'm doing this for myself. Well, just to know that your child is on her own unique way. And the same with Samuel. Because as a little boy, he came to me and he said, Ma, school's wasting my playing time. He wanted to be out in nature. And, that's why when that teacher at that teacher's parent meeting said to me, you know what, I'm sorry to say, but Samuel's not Millie. I looked at her, I said, what? Of course he's not Millie. And don't you dare compare them. And so Samuel became a nature conservationist, and he is a tour guide in Israel today. And we have 5 grandchildren, and it's such a blessing to see your family on the way, and the deepest bonds. Oh yes, is family. Because, that's where society starts. If there's rebels, if there are conflicts or tensions, it's our duty, I mean, Millie went through deep waters, but I said to you, I'll never leave you. And this is what I say to clients that have a difficult time. I will never give up on you. Never. And that is what sees us through, that kind of love that is unconditional and will not give up on anybody. That is divine love. That is divine love. And it's so wonderful that now at 80, what am I? I always have to look at the Jewish year. The last 2 digits numbers is what my birthday is. It is 5782. Oh, I'm 82. Okay, I'm 82. My husband is 90. No, and I'm a Teria, and this is where I end. Frankel said, "Listen, we're only fully ourselves on the last day of our lives. We may be only halfway on our journey of dreams, but we should be able to say, like that sculptress Helen Martins, if you ever saw her story, when she said, I have overcome darkness. That's it. With the light of truth. The path of the righteous is as a shining light that grows brighter and brighter until the coming day. That's it. That's the triumph of the human spirit that will turn everything around and make it serve you. Suffering serves us, our hurts. And this is the wonderful thing. I'm looking at Pan, that know what it's like to have been abused as a child, but she has a skill of knowledge in the area of abuse that has become her mission. And this is why, my passion is to do logotherapy all the way down right to the beginning. And to have a true transformation of not that you're going along with your hurts despite it, but that you've looked those hurts in the eye and you've turned them around. And then you make that abuse serve you in not abusing anybody else. And here is the yardstick. Truly, love your neighbor as yourself. In that, all the law is fulfilled. Okay? Thank you very much. I'm going to leave you. Bye. We'll have our conversations afterwards. Thank you, Nina.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shantall. It was very interesting, very touching, very inspiring presentation. And thank you for sharing your so personal story with us.
Right.
It's very important. Thank you.
My pleasure. And I think we'll have to call it a night, okay? Right. Thank you.